Hello, everybody. Welcome to K9s Talking Sense. I'm your host, Cameron Ford, and welcome to episode number 108. This episode is called Dog Emotion and Dog Training. And what I wanted to kind of cover in this episode with a guest I've had on before, which is Michael Nezbeth, we get into how emotion plays a role not only in our detection dog training in general, but with us and how we interact with each other. This episode is packed with lots of information, different viewpoints, a little bit of history about the dog industry. I really hope you guys enjoy the episode. And, of course, as usual, if you have any comments, suggestions, please send us an email, info@fordk9.com. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're feeling generous, give us a great review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the other locations. Those really help get our information out. Also, just want to do a quick thank you to our show supporters and sponsors. Getxent. If you guys don't know what Getxent is, those tubes that absorb odor. And you can also buy them from our other sponsor, Precision Explosives, who already have Getxent tubes impregnated with odor already. So from cadaver, narcotics, explosives, this is real odor. You guys can get these training aids at Precision Explosives. They are online. Just look up Precision Explosives and you'll be able to find a number of different things they have available to you. So without any further ado, let's jump into the episode. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of K9s Talking Sense. On this episode, I have brought back my friend Michael Nezbeth. You were in town, so we figured why not have a conversation about training. I guess for those who, obviously maybe the detection world haven't heard of you or don't know you, just give us a short little background about you and what you do and where you're from and where you might be going to, all the good stuff we've already talked about.
I don't know where I'm going to.
Yeah, sure, there you go.
My name is Michael Nezbeth. I'm from Canada. Own a company called Grassroots K9. We raise, train, develop, and breed working dog prospects. I'm really into like kind of puppy development and seeing them go from, day one to, hitting the road and doing what they have to do. We do also kind of do single purpose dogs as well in that manner. That's kind of, Grassroots also does pet dog training.
Okay. And within the pet dog training, you also have a couple of franchises, right?
Yes, we do. We have, as of last week, 7 locations. So 2 of them are stateside. So we have a Sarasota location and then a Maryland location on the American side. And then the rest of them right now are in Canada.
Okay. Yeah. So for those, you do a lot of seminars going over like bite work and decoy work and things like that. And I know probably a lot of the audience knows you're from there. What kind of got you in detection? What's the things that you like about detection? How did that world start happening for you?
Yeah, I think that ultimately, even with the bite work stuff, so much of that is olfactory based. So I call it like the dog's got to get to the dance. So when a lot of times we focus on, the biting and kind of the bite mechanics and so forth. But all that stuff is very important. But most of the profiles, if not all of them, it's the olfactory capabilities of the dog that get them to the dance, that get them to be able to do that. They're, again, I know it's... they're biosensors, and whether they're looking, whatever the target odor may be, all of those things run true. So when you're working, a dope dog, the things that are important there are how committed the dog is to its searching, and the same thing runs true for if you're working a dog on human odor, right? If you're trying to find a suspect, searching a building, tracking, open area searches. It's olfactory skills. So,
one of the things that I found that was super interesting about you was what's your degree in? What did you get your degree in college?
Psychology and sociology, and then also criminology.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm really big into kind of the why behind behaviors, figuring those things out, looking into, me and you have numerous conversations about, training methodologies and what we're doing to, and again, I think behavior is behavior. So figuring out kind of systems to play with that work across the disciplines, not just, well, this is your detection technique, or this is your, bite work technique, tracking, like what the core principles of learning kind of are the same, whatever we're teaching the dogs or working on.
Yeah, and what I found really interesting is, you came into this world with that kind of degree and understanding psychology, and from that, what led you into the dog aspect? How did you go from that world to go, I want to get into dogs?
Yeah, so I did, I was like a behavioral health technician for dually diagnosed adults. And I was at first like, this is what I want to do. I always had dogs like growing up. And I was I started decoying at like a French ring club, an unofficial French ring club in Florida, but never with the thoughts of like, this is going to be a career. And started to see like trends in what I was doing on the human side with the dog side. And then dogs just kind of took me from there. It was just a draw.
It's like a natural fit.
Yeah, I just went to it and just kind of stuck with it and been obsessive about dogs ever since.
Yeah. and obviously that's one of the biggest things that we both share with each other is that obsession with the dog world and how to improve and connecting with not just the dog, but then the human aspect of that. Which kind of leads me to where, since we've had you on before, I kind of wanted to go in this episode with a theme for like, how do we communicate? How can we as instructors, trainers, teachers, connect with our audience better? And you and I had already had conversations in the past 24 hours about like some of the things that we've felt and we've seen as teachers, instructors, and trainers, that there's a lot of stuff that we're passionate about, right? We get really excited about certain scientific things or psychological things. We can geek out on our that part of the world when it comes to dogs. But at the same time, the vast majority of people that are reaching out to us or that bring us to their areas to do seminars and lectures are in the beginning stages of their world and their connectivity to the dogs. And how do you view the role of that instructor, trainer aspect to what can we do better now that you've been around, you've been traveling like I have, and we've seen places from all over the world to around the United States? Where can we be better? How can we be better, basically? Like, what can we do to improve?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I try and do as when I have that instructor role is to kind of evaluate after each kind of workshop, seminar, and be like, hey, where are the specifics that I could have adjusted or done better? And I talk to you, you talk to me, we kind of critique each other. And what I've kind of stumbled on over the years now is that not everyone is as excited about all the intricacies and nuances as we are. So finding things that are going to have the most bang for the buck for the time that we have some of these. The workshops and seminars are hard because, sometimes they're 2 days, maybe 5 days. And being able to evaluate kind of where the teams are that you're working with and what is going to be the biggest return on investment for them. I think a lot of times, and I can speak personally for myself, that I'm just so excited about the information that I have and being like, you guys can look at all this stuff that we can do, and it's rightfully so. This is not a knock at any of the teams that we're working with, but a lot of them, they don't have aspirations to be a trainer or to be an instructor. They want to know with their dog that they have, what are some adjustments that they can make that will make them more proficient in their job. So being able to evaluate that and then communicate that effectively and also on the other side of that, not getting caught up on the I'm here for 2 days and let's do before and after videos.
Yes.
You know, like, because what happens with that is sometimes as an instructor, when you get so caught up on that, people end up being pushed to do things that may not be in the best interest of the teams, just solely based off of like instant results, right? So I think it's like a pendulum that kind of swings back and forth, and we have to find that happy medium specifically for the groups that you're working with, you know. So when I'm doing seminars, workshops, or so forth, I find that none of the seminars that I've done have been the exact same, right? Like, it's we're here right now with this dog team. What do they need? How can I help you? And what can I bring to the table to help make you a little bit better, right? And give you something that you're also able to continue when I leave.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like we talked about, my feeling I started having that to myself, going, I'm super excited about some of this information, and I feel passionate about a methodology or a certain thing of information. But what could be carried on after I left? And though I was giving them some, let's say, solid information, but like you said, was the student or the people attending, do they know where to put that information I give them? It may go, oh, those are some big words. And like we talked about in the audience, maybe there's a 5%, and that's kind of being generous sometimes, that are on the same page where I'm at. Like, they get what I'm saying and they know where to reference it from and they can connect to it. But what I was feeling was missing was the people that show up, which is a majority of them, want whatever thing they're working with to become better or solve a problem. And like you said, there's no quick fix. But could I give you like you said earlier too, an actionable tool that they can accomplish after I'm gone? And as little as it could be, it's big for them. It has a stronger outcome. And we as an industry have gotten really, because we've never had science really in our world until the past 10 or 15 years, and detection really kicking in. And I would say detection to me is one of the realms of the dog world where science has really gotten stronger. Like, science is invading the dog world in a lot of ways, but right now detection has chemistry, it has forensics, has psychology, it has a lot of the things that the science world has been looking at, but in detection it's really now coming to a forefront, where in general dog training psychology is very important, but there isn't like research necessarily, like a vast research done on dog biting and things like that, where in detection they're studying like this discipline, bombs, drugs, and they're sharing all this information. So we got really into that, and then we got excited to share that. So those that were really excited and motivated really wanted to share that information. And there's some cool stuff to that, and the audience can connect to certain things. They're like, yes, wow, that's amazing. Dogs can smell at this level, and this odor does this. But what I've seen now as the years have progressed, we got almost too focused on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And we're missing complete fundamental aspect of, can you read your dog?
Yeah.
Can a handler read their dog and go, yes, my dog's an odor, or read their dog and go, there's no odor here, or read their dog and go, oh, my dog's just smelling something that's distracting or it's interested in, and that's not odor.
Yeah.
That's a basic fundamental skill. We aren't focusing on that like we should. We're focusing on a lot of other things, like, well, if the air's moving this way, what is the odor doing? Or your dog you need to understand drives, and the average person, though they may find that interesting, isn't helping them with their actual problem, which was starting it from the most small thing, is reading the dog, to then, as we get better at reading their dog, then they can start understanding what's happening as they're reading their dog. So for me, and this is how me and you were talking, we're kind of connecting, is like as instructors, we were feeling like we weren't giving enough time to something just core, simple basics.
Yeah.
And get handlers just to do that stuff. And if they're interested in more, they'll probably seek us out for more information. And that's when we can give them those things that we're excited about. Or separating that out, like when we're going to do a seminar, it's a lot of handlers. Maybe there's some trainers in there, but our information should be catered to the wider part of the audience, not to the ones who are geeky like we are and really dig to that. And like me and you talked about, those of us that are in that kind of category, we get reinforced when those 5%ers come up to us and be like, oh, I totally love that. Yeah. It was so cool to hear you talk about this, that, and the other. And that other majority of the audience doesn't even know what questions to ask us, so they just stay quiet. So we're not taking it as, we're not reading it properly in a sense, in my opinion, that they're not connecting to what we're saying.
Yeah.
Because they're not saying anything, we just write off, oh, they get it. But a lot of times, as I've learned now through my own discovery, was they kind of weren't. Because if I see them again a year later and the problem is still there, what did I not do, or what did they not understand? And then the other part that is already happening in the dog world is that divisiveness of you have to be team this or team that. Yeah. And detection's been not into that fray as much as other dog things are. But in that, I got really heavily focused on a methodology. I liked delayed conditioning quite a bit. I had done simultaneous for years. And then I ended up being, through my own actions, the delayed conditioning guy, and really heavily sharing that information. The use of markers. Markers became more widely acceptable now. But within the detection community, there was this, I started just seeing a line in the sand in some categories where trainer so-and-so says I shouldn't do marking. Trainer so-and-so says I should do this. And I was like, though, all of it works. And what could I do better to have inclusion where if someone is much more comfortable, or maybe it's an agency and the way they train is whatever way, what can I do to help them, versus saying, you know what, you guys should definitely do delayed conditioning or using a marker. You should definitely use a marker because that will solve the problems. And though that might be true, if they don't fully understand all the nuances of delayed conditioning or a marker or things like that, then I didn't help them.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at things now going, what can we do to make detection be, I don't care what you're doing, what we want to accomplish is making you better.
Yeah.
And if you use whatever thing that you feel comfortable with, or that's the history you have, let's do that. But let's also have a conversation. If you're having problems, let's go over why the problems are occurring, and let's go over some pros and cons of ideas of how to progress through that or make that better. How have you or I know you do a lot in bite work, but what connections do you see?
Yeah,
in the world
I think there's an element with every instructor, and including myself, of like, what is the overall objective of what you're doing, of that workshop, of that seminar? What is your overall objective, right? And a lot of times, very early on, I found and it's subconscious, like you're not thinking about it, but very early on, like the objective was, I want to prove to you that this is the way. Right? From my experience and what I've done, I want to prove to you that this is the way. Yeah. And the longer that I've been in it, the more that I've traveled, and the more dogs that I've got to work with, the overall objective is I want to make you, that team, better. Right? So and being consciously aware, like knowing that you have biases, like everyone has biases, knowing that you have biases, and still being able to adjust accordingly to the dog that's in front of you. There's the age-old saying that dog training is a science, but also an art. And I feel like we're at a point now that we need to start swinging a little bit back more towards the art side of it. Not such rigid protocols. Protocols are important. Everyone, we get it, but being able to swing back a little bit to that art is where I think the bread and butter is, because that art is what connects, with the masses, right? There's the science may connect with that 5%, but the art side of it is what connects with the masses, and then to have that connection is also going to be what gives the biggest impact.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm very guilty of, for a number of years, going, this is the. I still prescribe to this is a way, but how I guess I would say I shared it was more of this is the way, and I struggled with that later on. Like at first I was so excited and I saw great results with this thing and I was like, this is the way.
Yeah, and your motivations for like were never to be like, I'm right.
Correct.
It's just you get so excited about the progress and success that you've seen following the system that you follow, that you want to share that with everyone, right? And it definitely, it's still a bias.
Of course.
It's still there's elements of ego that are tied to that, where I think we're both at is that it's just the goal, the total objective is to just try and make these teams better, empower them with tools that they're going to be able to use, and have return on investment. I also think a lot of times instructors can overcomplicate things.
Yes.
Right? Like it's like, well, okay, let's quote unquote dumb it down so that you, and I don't think that that's even the case. Like I'm not prescribing to like the dumb it down version of things. I think that being a talented and effective instructor is about working with the audience that you have, and it's not so much like, they won't get it, I'm like an elitist and I'm better than you, because I don't think that at all. I don't think that we're smarter than the average bears. So I think it's about just being able to read that audience, read what these teams need. That is a skill set within itself.
And it's speaking of detection, it's such a fast growing segment of the dog world now, and depending on where somebody's coming from, maybe they're coming from another segment of the dog world and they've seen or they've had the experiences they've had in those communities, and they come into detection. One of the things I do like about detection is it doesn't get brought into the argument of the typical dog training things of force-free or balance trainer or whatever, because in detection it's a reward-based system. I can't make a dog do detection per se. So we can stay out of the fray in some of those like really polarizing arguments. But at the same time, the person may be coming into it through their experiences. And if those of us who are teaching and working in detection can be good stewards of information and giving it in a way that, one, is welcoming, two, easy enough to follow, easy enough to replicate. And like you said, it's not a dumbing down, it's just finding what's appropriate, because it's like, again, in many other things in dog training, we're not just catering to the dog, we're not just catering to the human, we're catering to both, and both are unique. And that's something I think is super important, is to be able to go, okay, that's to me the fun part I have, is like, this combo is unique.
Yeah.
How do I get or connect to this combination to help them accomplish, in this case, having your dog look for an odor and report to you that it found it. And removing, in a lot of cases, some of the biases I may have for the things that I like, or find a way to share that connects to them. And that they can, and it's easy enough to keep doing, because once they feel accomplished and they can, this is okay, I can do this is not too hard, they get more motivated, and then it grows and it grows. Then there's this unique aspect within detection. You got the professional side, who purchase dogs already kind of loaded. Like they're selected. The dogs in most cases have the abilities. The handlers are there because they want to be there. On occasion, you may get somebody who chose to do it for whatever the reason is, but in general, your professional is there for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, like, I say it because you see it even outside of the detection world, right? When sometimes we get into some of the sport stuff, there's some dogs that they're never going to be like world level competitors in the bite sports, but they have a dog and it's kind of into it, and they're going to work it. So it's figuring out kind of the creative ways to get these dogs that may not have been bred for this purpose, or not have that overall desire to like be as much into it as some of the dogs that were selected.
Been bred for this.
Purpose bred dogs, right? I always say to handlers, like, hey, you guys have been given Ferraris, and then asked to drive them fast, where there's absolute learning that can happen there. But there's also, when we get to the more like the civilian side of things, and I'm sure it's similar in nose work, sometimes it's, hey, we have a 92 Honda Civic, and we're going to try and soup this thing up to be the most proficient 92 Honda Civic that it can be.
You got it.
And that, I think it's a lot of times for me, those are the fun ones.
You learn a lot from those.
Yeah, you learn, you get to try and problem solve and find unique ways that are going to get the most out of the genetic potential that dog has.
And there's the human side that comes into it, which is in one grouping, they're paid regardless of what happens, technically, right? That's the professional side. They're getting paid whether they go to the seminar, whether they take something away, their paycheck, it stays their paycheck. Whereas somebody who's spending their own money to be there has an expectation. Well, I paid money. I should be getting something out of this. I signed up because you're so-and-so, or you taught this, or there's something I connected to. I want something out of this. And those motivators between because the paid person is like, I'm not saying they don't want to be better. They definitely do. There's plenty that do. But the outcome is the feeling about the money spent is different. And then that driving factor for somebody who's spending their hard-earned money to spend time with me wants to get something out of it. And again, my goal as a teacher and instructor is I want them to leave feeling that they can carry something on. And there's challenges. And the hardest thing is, like we talked about too, is most seminars are 3 days.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that, like, the value to me in the seminar is what's given, and then the handlers, civilian, law enforcement, whatever it may be, are then capable of carrying it on, right? And I definitely feel the same pressure that you feel, because I want people. I don't take it lightly that people have spent their own money, taken time away from their families to come spend
sometimes driving hundreds of miles,
like a certain amount of time with me, right? So like there's the pressure on our end to kind of want to give them something that is tangible, that they can see right away there. Oh wow, look at this massive change. But that's also generally not how dog training works, right? Like it's kind of that pendulum. You're fighting yourself to be like, hey, I don't want to just do something for the sake of the before and after video. But I want to make sure that we can have lasting effects and lasting impacts on whatever the problem is that we may be working on.
And I want those that are handlers listening to this and watching this is to understand too. A lot of times this seminar is designed to be a seed planting session. I'm not going to fix. If you came here, I used to make a joke like, I forgot my magic fairy dust, so there's nothing I'm going to throw on your dog that we're going to fix overnight and then within 3 days.
Delta lost my bag with the...
So, but if they can come into it with the understanding that our goal is to plant some seeds, and it's on them to help growing it, and I'm here to keep giving you water if I can to keep that growing for you, but once I'm not there, the work is still you, but the expectation when we're together is let's have good constructive conversations. It's not just to come run dogs. That's a lot of times too, as we see both sides. You do the bite work side, me on the detection side, has been a lot of times people just want to show up and run dogs.
Yeah.
And that a lot of times isn't necessarily the right outlook to doing it. It is because just working dogs isn't going to make a whole lot better. It's good sometimes to evaluate, to say, ooh, look, there's this that I see. How would we address this? Well, in most cases, I need more than the 3 days to look at you and your dog to really dissect what it is. But based on what we see, let's talk about some ideas. And then let's go through the pros and cons of some of these ideas. And again, you, the user, the handler, you have to make the ultimate decision on what those pros and cons are. And I've been empowering people to do what we started saying more and more from Denver when we were there together to my last trip in Australia, which is sometimes I just need you, the handler, to fuck around and find out. Just FAFO. Just do some of that. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not going to break your dog. You know, you're not going to, your dog won't break overnight. And the joke I make all the time is, look whether you put your dog through already, you know? And your dog has made it through and it's not broken. So even if you make mistakes, because so much of dog training is driven by fear. Ooh, I don't want to do this because this could happen. Or another one is, well, so-and-so said, if I do this, this would ruin my dog. If I pay on something I don't know, I'm going to ruin my dog. My dog will now start automatically alerting to paper clips because there was a paper clip there or whatever it was. So I have to kind of share, no, it's okay to make mistakes. You know, I make them all the time.
Well, if we just dissect what learning is, learning is making mistakes, right? Like no one ever progresses in anything in life by playing it safe, right? Correct. Just staying on the safe side of things, right? It's I give the kind of loose example of like I have a daughter that's in kindergarten right now, and if she comes home and she says, "Hey, Dad, I can count to 25," I'm like, "Wow." Super impressed, Ezra. That's amazing. Well, fast forward to when she's in the 12th grade. If she comes home and says, "Hey, Dad, I can count to 25," then there's a problem. Right. The progression happens by pushing beyond 25, making those mistakes, getting into multiplication, getting into division, and kind of struggling through those moments is where the learning occurs. Right. So I always say if we avoid those moments of failure just for the sake of, oh no, I don't want to do the wrong thing. Ultimately what we're doing is avoiding learning.
Correct. Right? But we have to be willing to get out of our comfort zones, get out of enjoying those easy wins. I bring up a lot of times to teams when I look at detection, obviously, and I'll say, set up a normal training thing. I just want to see what you guys do and how you set it up. And so often and these are teams that are technically certified or teams that are already competing, and the hides are like that far from the edge of the surface, or it's always within a seam or whatever it is. And I'm like, okay, if it were in the beginning stages and I was just brand new teaching a dog, I'm cool with all that. But A, if we're certified, or B, if you're competing, that's not your reality. And the joke I make, especially on the professional side, is, tell me last time you found drugs in the filing cabinet this far from the edge. I've never found it that way, of course.
In the seam of a car door.
Exactly. It's just never there. So we need to look at, as we progress, like you said, well, then I need to progress my training to challenge so I can purposely find where some of these gaps exist. And most of the gaps, to be honest, are the human side of the equation, not so much the dog. The dogs are amazing creatures and can solve a lot of things, but we also end up teaching the dog to rely on us because we're not really ever challenging things, or we try to save the dog. And I'll give another example. I was watching somebody here the other day, and they had set a hide up on the property, and the dog had not found something in that way from what I could tell, but they didn't want to lose. So because they didn't want the dog to lose, they kept talking to the dog and check right here, check right here. How about right here? Good boy, good girl. And they just kept doing the thing over and over and over and over again, and eventually just brought the dog right to it. And then the dog, and that, you can see the dog as they were talking, like, I don't know what you want from me, but if this is making you happy, I'm cool with it.
You convinced me.
Yeah. And then eventually she went to the thing, and you know, it wasn't a training session. I was just happened to be observing. They were there for another reason, and they were like, they used a location to put a hideout. So I'm just sitting there, and I don't even know if they even knew who I was. I was just watching. But I walked away from watching that going, what was truly gained? The dog just pleased you because, and instead of walking away and calling it a failure, like, okay, my dog's not ready for that, they didn't want to lose. So they did all this help to get the dog to the win.
Yeah.
And what was really gained from that? Nothing more than making me feel good, to be honest with you, the way that I'm the handler.
Yeah.
The only thing that we got is that my dog found it, but my dog didn't learn anything but other than pay a lot of attention to me.
Yeah.
I'm a source of information for
I'll
you.
help you through this.
I'll get you through it.
Yeah.
But later on, the reality, whether you're a professional or a sport competitor, you don't know
You're
this
not gonna
answer.
have the, yeah.
And when you start experiencing some level of stress, or you see the dog experience, we overcompensate with involvement.
Yeah.
And the history to that involvement had some negatives to it, had some downsides. And though it was learned, and though there was technically, like I said, from the big trainer picture, there's downsides to that, but the outcome was positive for the dog. Mm-hmm. The dog was like, well, I got a win out of this. I don't know why, but I did. So what I've learned is when this occurs, default to the handler, and the handler will get me through. Mm-hmm. And in the real side of things, the handler can't utilize that. Yeah. We're the worst piece of information when it comes to detection. So I sometimes have to have conversations with the handlers and trainers. Hey, it's okay to walk away. Take the L. Walk away.
I think great example. I have another two examples that go along with that, but kind of bridge a little bit of the gap of the olfactory and the bitey stuff, right? So one thing is personally me. I get obsessive with like new training things, and I got really into laser directionals. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's basically you have a laser, it guides the dog to an area of interest or where something may be occurring. And I got super heavy on like, wow, look how cool this is. I can send the dog way out there and fun. And what ended up happening with my personal dog when I was doing it is all of her hunting commitment just stopped because she was waiting on me to say, go over there and check this out. The other example that I have is where I think it's more common in the detection world now for people to start saying, if I missed it, I missed it in training. But when we transition and we're doing area searches or we're doing a building search, and it was a high hide person, not civil hide, no equipment on, just hiding basically in the roof. And the dogs are searching. We're getting, some of them are doing well, getting changes of behavior, but they're not super familiar with that kind of picture. So some of them are struggling through it. And I'm watching the handlers, every single one of them trying to convince the dog to go down there. It's the exact same principle. It's just this is a different target owner now, right? And wanting to guide them over there, where I'm like, hey, let's just let them fail. Yep. Like the failure is, there's really good value in that moment. Again, bridging kind of those two worlds together, where the same kind of learning principles are involved. Let them fail.
It's if they were on their own and there was no human involvement. How many times would an animal fail before it succeeds? Yeah, like nonstop. Yeah, like so much. All you got to do is put on a National Geographic channel and watch an animal show, a wild animal show in a sense, and watch a significant number of failures until they actually maybe find something. They're almost like the point of starvation in some cases. Yeah. But there's valuable lessons that come from that. I don't want to starve to death, so maybe I need to change a tactic. Maybe running at the prey was a horrible idea. Maybe I should stalk it first and do something. And they learn through those failures. If I'm that stopgap too much, I've heard numerous times trainers over the years say, never let the dog fail. And in a early stage, I have more understanding of that. I'm okay with, the goal of this session is to teach something, and it's really early on, so I'm going to avoid a complete failure, potentially. And I can't even say that's 100% that answer, but I can see where the premise is. My job in the very, very early stages is to teach and to get success. But as it progresses, I need to start removing that and allowing some learning to occur, and the learning occurs by failures. And there is, especially as I've gotten deeper into understanding something, and it took being around Doc Hilliard to really bring up a good example, and you'll love this because it's a bite example, but I share it now in detection. But he calls it Satan's infinite loop. And the example he gives on the bite work side of the equation is the dog bites, but then it has to let go of the bite in order to be correct, and then could get bite again. So he says, but sequence of training in most times in the infinite loop is dog bites, dog's commanded to let go, dog doesn't let go. So some type of control or aversive or management happens. Dog eventually lets go, and when the dog lets go, they give a bite again. So he was like, so something that was supposed to be a learning thing, like you're not supposed to do this, turns into, depending on the motivation of the dog, oh, I'll tolerate some really bad stuff because I'm going to get something out of it. He goes, so here's the other side of the equation. The correct response is dog bites something, give the commands given to release, dog releases, dog gets to bite again. He goes, so both examples, the end result is the exact same thing. One's a negative, one is a correct, and the result is still the same.
Or I would even add on to that, is that specifically for the biting and the outing, sometimes we ask them to out, they don't out, some type of corrective measure is given, they out, then they bite again, and we're so caught on finishing on a win, is that maybe through repetitions of that infinite loop that's happening, they finally do it without any corrective measures happening, and then we want to put them up on a win. So then actually, when they do the right thing, the game is over.
Yes. And he brings that, there's the two ways he brings that up is, and when they've done it correctly, we're like, it's a win, we're done. He goes, when it really should be, when the dog doesn't do on the command to release, when they do release through whatever way you got them to release, they're done.
That's failure.
You're put up. Game's over. Sorry about you. You're not doing this again for a little while. And I brought that example into detection. So the detection example I give is the dog, for whatever reason, acknowledges or maybe even fully responds to an odor that's non-target. So what do? We do some type of management to help them ignore that. But what we do, like you said, is when we go to an odor and go, here you go, versus going, if you acknowledge this and it's not what we're looking for, and you've done it enough in a way that convinced me as a handler that that was a correct thing and it wasn't correct, I just continue on until you get to the correct thing, versus going, that's wrong, we're done. Now, I also understand with higher motivated dogs, that can work well. To a dog who's not so motivated, they're like, thank God you're putting me back. I get to go back in the car and chill out.
That's not a punisher.
This is fantastic. So we have to find the right way on the detection side of things to say, if this isn't the correct answer, how can I use that failure to become a learning thing? And in some cases, it could be what I heard Dr. Melanie Uda and some other ones call it like a micro break. Like, I'm not putting you up, but we're not continuing for a little bit. The way I take it even further for me is I just say, okay, let's stop for a minute. We're going to reset and give the dog a choice, a much more clear choice option. So what I do is I put whatever the thing was that was really highly distracting or focusing for them near, not too far away from the target. So if they pay attention to this, nothing happens, but they literally don't have to go very far to the right answer. When the right answer is there, then I lavishly reward this. And so that way I can take a dog who's maybe not as motivated, who's a little distracted by, could be food, could be whatever it is, and just say, hey, I know you might like this for whatever the reason is, and I will want to know what that reason is later on. But right now, what I want you to only understand is this doesn't give you anything, but this does. And construct it in a way that it's very easy for the learning process. Then increase the distance again. But after I've had enough repetitions, a lot of times, though, what happens in the detection community is we want to fix it in that training problem. And that's not the place to fix it. We do need to stop, reconstruct the training session in a way that can accomplish the goal. But just like Satan's infinite loop, we just go, oh, we'll just fix it here. Or in the detection world, more specifically, the human gets involved to solve the problem for the dog, and the dog goes, I still got to win anyway. And my win is through you. And that's never going to be the answer in real life. I always tell people, because there was another pendulum swing I've witnessed in the detection world. So when I first got into it, everything was detail searching. Walk backwards, present every couple inches, feet, whatever, and make the dog's nose go right to where I'm presenting. And that still exists to a certain level today, but not nearly what it was. It was commonplace when I first got into it. The pendulum now is I do nothing.
Yeah.
I show up, I let the dog do his thing because I've been told that I have to blame my generation, because my generation was the ones who learned from the ones who that's all they knew was to walk backwards, present everything. My generation learned from those individuals and now that just didn't feel right. I didn't like that so much. So then as we became more training, our knee-jerk reaction was like, don't get involved at all.
Yeah.
In fact, you stay out of it. You do nothing. So then the generation that we taught, which is most of the ones that exist today, walk into a space or a room and they're like, I'm not doing anything. I just let the dog do its thing. I follow it around, but that's all I do.
Yeah.
And we can't have do nothing either.
Yeah, it has.
There is a collaboration that exists.
It's very the same as when we're talking about the building searches, the laser directionals, or even not laser, just some type of directionals.
Yeah.
There's a time where the dog needs to receive some guidance from the handler to say, hey, not over there. Because dogs are funny, man.
Yeah.
Like we did a most recent scenario that we did. It was a building search scenario. The handler started making announcements, and then I made someone surrender from the door number 1.
Okay.
Right? Hey, we surrender. I'm here. It's a big building. And there was actually another civil hide further into the building, right? But what ended up happening with some of the dogs is they would fixate on the spot where they seen the person surrender from.
Sure.
And they would, if we just left it up to them, there's no convincing that's going to get them out of that. So there are points where we want them to go in there and realize, hey, no, there's nothing in here, move on your own. But there is also points where they need to get some direction from their handler and say, okay, you've checked in there, that's all clear. Now go further or go this way, right? So it's playing. If you direct them too much, they're just relying on it. If you don't direct them enough, they can get stuck in OODA loops of whatever.
It's playing hot and cold without ever telling them they're cold.
Exactly.
They don't know how. Like I don't know what to do.
Like, hey, you need to go this way. Check this out over here. But again, not too much and not too little. It's the porridge.
Yes, it's the. I steal a saying from Pat Stewart all the time: as little as possible, as much as necessary.
Yeah.
And the detection community, what I see, it's a little bit more on the sports side than the professional. They both share it, but it's I don't want to present because presenting is bad. And I will ask, well, why is presenting bad? Oh, because I was told if I present, I'm cueing the dog to respond. I'm like, okay, so why does that conversation occur? Well, in most cases, the nexus of that conversation came from, well, the only thing they presented was where odor was at. Because back when the handler knew, they would do that. Yeah. So if that's all you did, then yes, the repercussion or the fallout is where you present, a dog could say, oh, when you got involved, that means something's there. So what I say is, well, why aren't you presenting other things? Yeah. If a dog doesn't sniff something, does that mean there's no odor there? Maybe, but if I see my dog miss like a significant section, like this, let's say this table behind us, they didn't check that. And what if what I'm looking for could have very little odor to it, or the wind's not blowing that direction? Yeah. But if I did get my dog to put its nose on it, because it didn't do it by itself, I may find something, but I also may not. So what I have to do in training is tell handlers, like, okay, in this room, in the beginning stages, is like this item, and this item have nothing there. But I want you to do is just let your dog search, and if your dog sniffs that item by itself, don't worry about it. If it doesn't check that item, at some point, all I want you to do is just cast the dog or present the dog to that area, let it sniff. And as soon as it comes in to sniff that area, what you presented, you step out of the way a little bit. Yeah. It's like a dance.
Yeah.
So as the dog's coming in, I'm moving out. And to get comfortable with that, because there's going to be a time, because what I see, this is the part I see more so on the sports side, they'll use body pressure to try to bring the dog to an area. Yeah. They just use like their movement, or they're like, I'm going to crowd you into here. Versus just simply walk over, present as the dog comes over. Because the dog is naturally going to follow presentations, whether you had never trained it or not.
Curiosity.
It's the commutative, the social referencing, that's the best word to say, they've learned in life. They've learned from a little puppy, your gestures mean something.
Here.
Exactly. Yeah. So we can use this, again, because of the fear-based driving things, we throw the baby out with the bathwater in certain aspects. And what I have to bring back is there's a balance. We can collaborate. I don't want to collaborate too much. I want to collaborate just enough. I want the dog to be independent
and
enough.
Collaborate on the right things, right? Like when you're, I should also say, because I kind of dirty talked lasers. I'm not opposed to lasers.
No, neither
right?
am I.
I think just from my own mistakes.
You saw a fallout from it.
My laser was a promise that there was something good.
There's an expectation there.
Yeah, where we need those directionals, or if you're guiding the dog on things to search, it is guiding them on things to search, not guiding them that there's odor here.
Yep.
Right, or guiding them to their final response.
Yep.
Right, so that's where, as long as the dog is processing that information correctly, and we're doing it on our end to say, okay, that room is out of play now. I need you to go over here and check out over here. It doesn't mean that there is any. All I'm saying is go over here and search, not go over here and find.
Yep. And this brings up another category that I never really paid attention to until recently when I'm reading a book from Clive Wynne. And I'm totally spacing on the name of the book right now, but it's basically, I think it's Dogs Love or Love, whatever. It's something about love and dogs. And I'm totally, again, because I'm caught in the moment doing a podcast, forgetting the title. But it's his most current book. And what really got me into it is because he was one of the critics of some of the cognitive results from cognition testing. And what he shared in there was, so one of the things that I share frequently is that there's this unique ability about dogs to read human communication and intention better than any other species on the planet. That part isn't so much under debate, but what was under debate was dogs were the only ones to have a certain type of cognition. And he challenged that by saying, basically one of the things that Dr. Brian Hare brought into the equation was dogs, out of all the species, have this really great ability to read human gestures, better than almost any other species out there. And Clive was like, it's kind of weird though, because I've seen other species follow gestures. So then he went down this path basically to not intentionally disprove what the research was showing, but to answer his own questions. And what he kind of discovered was, actually, a lot of species will follow gestures if they've been raised from young, so domesticated.
Yeah.
Whether it's a domesticated species or not, it was, so the example of Dr. Nathan Hall, which I didn't know at this point until I read the book, had taught bats to follow gesture communications that he had raised. So he's like, so it wasn't unique to a species. The next step was, because so what was unique about Brian Hare's research, there's a guy in Russia doing the exact same thing. They just didn't know each other. They had the same outcomes. So scientifically, that was like, ooh, see, it's validated, right? But how Clive looked at it was, okay, so I can agree that a wolf won't necessarily follow my communications. However, when I go to Wolf Park in Minnesota, there's wolves there who are raised by humans who will follow it. So is it truly unique to a dog, or is it a domestication process? And then to take it the next step, they went out and basically, this is back when he was at University of Florida, went out and found feral dogs that had been captured by animal control or whatever. They sent his undergrads that were doing the research, and the feral dogs would not follow communication. So then he took a species that was supposed to be just naturally good at it, weren't doing it. So then that became a question mark. Yeah. Without spoiling the book too much, what it comes down to, what the dogs do possess better than most other species, is their emotional connection to us. And it rung so true to this one paragraph in the book where he says they did a test and they deprived the dog from its human connection for 12 hours. Also deprived it from food for 12 hours. And when presented food and their human together, they went to the human every time.
Yeah.
And as the test progressed, so in the very first times they did the test, the dogs stayed at the human for a really, they didn't even care about the food. As they kept doing the test, they still would go to the human, but then go to the food pretty quickly afterwards. Yeah. It still showed to the dog, human was more important than the thing that makes it survive. Food.
It's like counter to Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes. Yeah. So what then drove him was because as a researcher, and looking at things from a very practical standpoint. And again, for as long as he's been doing it, we never, like, dogs they don't have a soul, they're not emotional, they don't do these things. And he goes, turns out there's a significant role in emotion. And cognition isn't just an intelligence thing, it's also an emotional thing. And here's where I'm bringing it back to detection. Why, in some cases, when the dog knows the answer is here is odor leads to the thing that you love, but if the human leaves it, they'll leave it too.
Yeah.
And when the human doesn't know the answer, they don't know that odor's there, or they're doubting the dog, and the human says, I'm out of here, dogs will leave. It's not just because the dog isn't committed to odor, or they haven't done enough odor work, or there's not a strong enough association, or the dog's not motivated. A dog that's really connected to its human will go, yeah, but I'll go with you. If you're not going to go, if you're not connected to this, and that's profound, because not only are some of those things that we already know that could be the issue, all the things that's brought up, like maybe there isn't connection to odor, or maybe there's not a high enough, dog's not motivated enough, but maybe it's also their connection to you.
Yeah.
And when you are acting different, which in most cases on a real search or a competitive search, the human's acting different.
Yeah, for sure.
We've changed an emotional connection that's happening. And we've all got that. We've all heard stress runs down leash and all these things. But we never truly, at least for me, I'll say, appreciated that maybe it was a high emotional connection to dog to human. And this is why I see it more often in sport than I do professional. Because in most cases, the sport competitor eats, sleeps, lives, breathes with their dogs. Their dogs are in bed with them. Their dogs. Where you're professional, in a lot of cases, unfortunately, have been told, don't pet that dog when you're home. Lock that sucker in a box in its cage. Give it no attention unless you're working. That's an old school mentality. It's still prominent though, but it's shifting finally to say, especially when you ask any military dog handler, when was the best relationship you had with your dog? Every single one of them will tell you when I was deployed.
Deployment, yeah.
Because I lived with a dog. It was in my environment. I slept with it. We slept next to each other in the bed, all that kind of stuff. And when I have to rely on you for the saving my life and the life of the other soldiers that are with me, I need to know you really well. I need to know these littlest things about you, and I need the dog to know me really well. And the only way you get there is by having that interaction. And if I deprive you from that interaction, I'm limiting our ability to be successful and to be intimately familiar with each other. And to read those deep nuances that tell me that's distracting, that's odor, there's nothing here.
Yeah.
And, or being able to read my dog, like, I think it's on odor, but that odor is different enough. And I'm leaving and it's coming with me, but there's this conflict here to understand that better.
That's what I was going to say. Like the other side to that is just having the awareness of that being a thing, period, right? Like, without having to dive too deep into it, just knowing that, like we've called it for years, bond with the dog, whatever it's labeled as, like it's there, and it's more pronounced in some dogs versus other dogs, but being able to be aware of that and adjust your training and how you're operating with the dog kind of accordingly, right? Being like, hey, my dog, like my personal dog is not a very clingy dog to me. If you have a ball and some food, she's your dog, kind of dog. But then my dog that I had before her was obsessed with me. You know, you get up to go to the fridge at 2 a.m. and she's following you there, right? Like, so being aware of this emotion, this connection, so you can also evaluate, how is that with me and this dog? A dog that's really emotionally connected to me, or like my stage 5 clinger dog.
Right.
How am I going to adjust my training to correct for that, or to help us deal with those?
I was going to say, get through it.
Yeah.
Use it to your advantage.
Yeah.
It's a thing which drove me to be really infatuated to paying attention to. So to kind of share, I've been doing this 30 years now, and certain things motivate me differently now than it did in the beginning. And one of the things I'm really drawn to these days is that relationship to dog to human. And I see it really good in the hunting dog world. It's just the hunter, his dog, and in almost all cases, the dogs are off leash, searching these huge areas. They're really good at reading their dogs. They can tell some things. We are also dealing with some things that are what I call more natural or instinctual to the dog. But my goal was, what can I learn from that world? Because I'm kind of doing a similar thing. My dog is looking for something, using its nose to find it. And why or how can I take something that is truly instinctual, but really apply it to something that's kind of artificial? Detection has got an artificial component to it. The dog's not naturally drawn to drugs or explosives or firearms. But is there something from that world that I could pull into it? So as I got watching that world, there was just this beauty for me that I could see, especially with certain trainers, like Natalie brings up, not to draw in the force-free world versus the balanced trainer versus the compulsive. I like to challenge trainers who use e-collars a lot or use whatever training tool a lot. And I don't care what the tool is. Can you do it without the tool? Whatever the tool is, can you also teach this without the tool? Because to me, to be a good trainer or to challenge myself as a trainer, can I do it in a different construct? Can I teach something with something, and can I teach it without something? Because what I've definitely learned in real life is certain things will fail. I have to have something else that could be a backup, and can it work? So when I see our industry get really focused on a new tool or gadget or whatever, and it becomes all the rage, there's become so hyper fixated on that tool or gadget that I also look at they're missing a component of, can you do it without it? I understand you can do it with it, and there's some skill with that. There's a lot of skill. Again, taking an e-collar aspect, that's a very powerful tool. It can be highly misused, and there's lots of things to deal with, fallout and negative and how the dog emotion and all kinds of things. But there's a skill to using it too, in a way that shows dog can do some things. But I also want to see if for whatever reason the tool was banned, it didn't work, it failed on you, can you also accomplish the same task minus that tool? It's the same. I can do the same thing with a leash. You can't use a leash right now. Only use what you got. So in that journey, when I would watch the hunters, I was drawn to the hunters who were not the status quo. Because the hunting community, e-collar is what's got a unique thing. In the world of dog training, you can see in pet training, there's a very combative and divisive tool versus not.
Total us versus them.
Yeah. You go to the hunting community, there isn't that to that level, not to that level, not even close to that level. And the other part of the dog training community doesn't even go after that world over there. They don't even bother touching them.
Don't give them ideas, man.
Yeah, I know, right? So, but what I was drawn to were those trainers whose dogs had nothing on them, not even a collar. 6 Labradors lined up behind the trainer with nothing on them. Calls up a dog by its name, does the little dummy fall, 3 or 4 of them, and then sends the dog to get that one, brings that dog back, sends the dog to go get one of the other ones. I was so in all of that. I say all of that to say none of those guys gave a shit about operant conditioning. Never gave a shit about positive punishment, negative punishment. It was about, can I work with this dog? Were they using those things? I'm sure they were, but they weren't on, because I go to some of their forums too. They weren't on those forums going, well, are you using negative punishment? Or
about the quadrant?
They weren't in any of the that was not even, it was so focused on genetics, so focused on working with the instinctual aspects of the dog. And again, because I know there'll be plenty of people that will give lots of examples of really bad training from that community, and I've seen it. I'm not blind to that. What I was drawn to were the ones who didn't go those ways and had really good outcomes. And that's what drew me, because that connected to me on the emotional connection between human and dog. And I found that to be the most beautiful thing. and why when I see those things, those small segments of that world that were really successful, what could I do? And back to the point I was bringing about Natalie bringing up to me was because I came the way I was brought up in the dog world, it was borderline abusive. It was heavy compulsion. I'm aversive to that myself now. I'm not a force-free trainer. I won't say I'm a force-free trainer, but I like to challenge those I work with to get out of what they were comfortable with, and can you do it without whatever the tool is? I don't care what the tool is, but what can you do it without it? Which is drives me now, because it's like the ones who came from the force-free world who now go, yes, I see value in balance, because they struggled with, no cookie I have will make this stop, so how do I deal with this? So there's that side of the argument. And again, not to drag this conversation into those things, what I want to look at is that beautiful relationship.
I was gonna say, man, sometimes we like, and I know that you see it all the time, but when we get to we're doing reps with some guys and girls that we haven't seen before, and they pull their dogs out, it's like almost instantaneous. Like you can be like, oh wow, that is a really good relationship. Like that dog loves working with you, you love working with that dog. There's no like manufactured and a lot of times, like we said, it's not people that are like super big into the training philosophies of I'm gonna follow this, and that's just like, no, like that dog enjoys you, you enjoy that dog, like, and it's Stevie Wonder could see it, like it's
well, you're bringing up something that I know, and this isn't to pit male versus female, but tell me if you see this. What I see is, in more cases, women perform in a lot of ways training with their dogs better than men, and I'll say that is because the nurturing side that most women love their dog no matter the outcome. They're going to be like, oh, it sucked today, but that's okay, I still love you. Not to say that some guys don't have that. Some guys, plenty guys do, but the male ego walks away from a failure sometimes with like, this little fucker, man, which is why I kind of pull back from trainers who refer to dogs as that little fucker he's doing this to you. He's saying, fuck you, do this. No, sometimes it's just confusion. Do dogs want to better their situation? Of course they do. I want to better my situation, but I'm not doing it in a malicious way or negative intent. Yes. So I want, and I mean, have you seen the same thing on the patrol side where if you looked at male versus female, have you seen relationship aspects different between female handlers and male handlers?
I would say, yeah. I would say even like the vast majority of Grassroots K9 trainers are female trainers, I definitely think there's a lot that comes with that, patience, higher levels of patience, generally overall better communicators. I think that like it's absolutely I think, and of course this is not to say that there's
plenty of guys that are this way too, for sure.
That's not at all what I'm saying.
It's just we're looking at it from a broad stroke kind of view.
From a 30,000 foot view, for sure. More of the relationships where I was like, wow, that's a good relationship with a dog. It would be with like a female.
And I'm super thankful that I'm, again, been in this long enough to see this major influx of far more female trainers in existence now, both on the bite side. The detection side was already kind of skewed that way. So when I came into detection more exclusively, it was already kind of established. There was more either female handlers or female trainers that were kind of established within the detection community. But I'm seeing it in the law enforcement community now, like more program. Like if I go to Australia, I want, and I could be off on this, but I will say, a lot of the units I've gone over there with are run by, it's either a female training director, a female supervisor who has already gone through the ranks of trainer and now is in a supervisor role. And the ability to communicate within that network is easier in the sense of like change is easier to occur. Conversations are less like pushed off because there's like, well, let's talk about it. There's just a natural, but I think it's a huge positive for the industry to level this out more than, and I have to say it in this way, the old crony guys that are, have the mentality of, I will make a dog do this. All I need is a leash and a 6-foot choke, or I'm sorry, a 6-foot leash and a choke chain to do this, versus like the other ways of looking at it. Yeah. And the more diversified we've become, we are embracing there's other ways to look at it. And some of it is, again, circling all the way back around to the fuck around to find out is, and I'll say this because I've been around long enough again, the women that came into K9 in the late 80s and 90s was a very small percentage. And the shit that those women had to put up with by the guys in that industry and the women that stuck through it and got through it had a lot to get through and a lot of shit to put through. But because they were kind of left in by themselves or just put off because they were the women or whatever, they did a lot more of the fuck around and finding out because no one was helping them. Yeah. So they had to really cut their teeth on their own. And moving forward, now that those women have been in it long enough, I would put them in the category of 20 to 30 years now. I have seen, the only downside I've seen to that is, and I don't begrudge them because of this, the shit they had to go through has also jaded a certain level of sometimes how they interact with the newer trainers. Okay. Some of the shit that they got, they actually have passed the way they treat some of the other trainers. And I can understand it in the sense of, yeah, this group didn't have to go through what you through, and what you went through should not have happened. But it's hard to judge the past on the standards of today. Yeah. So we can't look at it in that sense. I totally agree that it shouldn't have happened that way. But at the same time, don't do the same thing to the next generation that was done to you, even though it's less than what you went through. I won't even compare it. But there are similarities that pass down that inhibit some growth. Okay. That hold back.
You've been around longer than I have. No, that's not an old joke.
No.
So I haven't even experienced that part of it. Like what my experience has been with, great handlers, great trainers. Yep. And maybe I'm biased as well. I have 2 daughters of my own. So and it wouldn't be right if I didn't mention that, my daughter Brielle, she's 11 years old now. Yep. She competes in a bite sport with her dog, but she was the youngest in the sport to get a title. She was 8 years old when she got her first title. And then 11 years old now when she closed out her level 1, right? So that's more than I've gotten in that sport. Sure. So like I see this and I see how the community as a whole kind of interacts and kind of like holds her up. And like right now, there's going to be tough roads ahead for her for sure. But right now it's from like an area of like empowerment. She's crushing it, and she tracks the dogs. She does anything that she can be involved in with the dogs. She's there and involved in, and she's getting help from endless amounts of people that want to help her. She's, by the time she's 15, she's going to be 10 times the trainer that I have ever been. So I see that, and right now I don't push her to do it. My 5-year-old wants nothing to do with dogs right now, so that's hey, cool. But, whatever, just seeing that and the idea for her, like, she wants to be a canine handler. So the struggle that the women before her have gone through have laid the road for her, for sure, and she gets to see that, and a lot of them that we have personal relationships with are great to her, man.
It's in those that are watching, listening to the podcast, we have to have sometimes these difficult conversations.
Absolutely.
We have to be willing to talk about some of the things that maybe aren't the most comfortable to talk about, because that's how we get better, by acknowledging the mistakes of the past. And I don't even have enough fingers and toes to count the mistakes I've made. And bad judgment saying things the wrong way. I couldn't even apologize enough to the dogs I've worked with over the years in my life, to how I've interacted with people, which is why I'm willing to, be vulnerable in the sense of
have these
conversations, and be also willing to say, hey, those that are willing to listen, if you feel you fall into one of these categories, all we can try to do is be better each time. And that's my goal, is to try to be better, which is why I'm having this conversation, which is why for me, as I go and do more seminars, and my goals for the next year, as I end each year, I always kind of plan what I want to do for the next year in my instruction. And, it's going to come off as a plug, but I'm not trying to make it a plug. But my goal for the next seminars next year is to be just about results. What can I do to get better results with the handlers and their dogs? Yeah. And then to help handlers identifying symptoms and then coming up with remedies to that. And that's all I really want to focus on. I don't want to get deep in the weeds on science anymore. Yep. Not that I won't at some point, but I know I want to adjust. And I also, my bigger goal is to create more inclusivity between the different sides that exist. So whether it be a training methodology, or whether it be a professional versus sport, and all the different things, if we can do more to get knowledge from each other and to better the
better all around.
Yes, as the old saying goes, especially from the Navy side of things, a rising tide lifts all ships. And if we can bring that all together by also through the difficult conversations and acknowledging problems, acknowledging the failures, and owning that, having accountability, we can get forward.
Absolutely.
And realizing, I'll kind of end it close to this, going to social media to hash out these things isn't the location. The location is this, face to face.
Absolutely.
And to be in a group. And I'm sharing this to everybody. Do you honestly think when you go to Facebook and you make a post about something you believe in, are you going to convince the other party that all of a sudden you're absolutely right? How many times has anybody said, dang it, you know what? The way you said,
the earth is not flat.
Yeah, you're right. I just needed to hear it from you.
Yeah.
So I want us to kind of reflect, do some self-reflection, the amount of time that you spend and the emotional expense you have going online to have a dispute or an argument. Is that worth it? Or could you maybe look at it and go, ooh, that's really driving me crazy, but by responding to this is only going to perpetuate this issue further and not gain any progress. It's only going to polarize further versus going, you know what, I'm gonna take a breather, walk away from the computer or my phone, put it down, and go, you know what, the next time there's an opportunity, the right place, the right time, and in person, let's see if we can have a conversation with somebody. And use that moment to try to bring something forward, or to create, a conversation where I'm willing to hear it. Because I think in a lot of arguments, both sides have their truths, and they're going to be connected to that. But when we hide behind the device, it's a lot easier to do some things that we would not do in person.
I think the other thing that my closing statement would be is that I think sometimes people take themselves too serious.
For sure.
Right. The internet, of course, it's a great place. There's a lot of value, but it's also just the internet. Like, it's just social media. Like, don't take it that serious. And I was talking to you earlier about, I made a post. I was working with an agency, and they had a Malinois, but it was like really compact and kind of looked a little bit like a corgi. And I posted it online and said, oh, look at this combat corgi. And not surprisingly to me, there's a ton of comments of people saying that that's obviously not a corgi. That is not a corgi. You're wrong. And it's, at some point in my life, things like that I would be arguing with them online or getting upset or whatever it may be. But it's the internet. This is it's not real life,
No.
And don't take yourself so serious.
And there's, especially on training, right?
Yeah.
it portrays this image of perfection, because that's what people really like to share. They want to share the perfection. And that makes us feel good. That's, again, goes back to the ego thing. And then there's this whole, like we talk about, like everybody says, it's the algorithm. We're going to do the algorithm. You know, at the end of the day, who controls the algorithm? You do. Because if you use polarization things to control the algorithm, then that's what's going to control the algorithm. But if we say, you know what, I'm not going to go for that clickbait and get pulled into that to drive the algorithm, you know what it does? Let me show my work. Let me just keep sharing videos of me working my dog. I encourage everybody, maybe instead of reacting to someone's post about whatever the topic could be, whether it be political, dog training, colors of the sky, whatever it is,
Corgi or
Mal, how about take that same energy and shoot a video of you and your dog and sharing it for exactly what it was. If it was a great session,
awesome.
Right on.
Yeah.
But if it was a shit session and it was a failure, share that too.
Yeah.
And share the notes. Why? And if we can just connect to those kinds of things, the algorithm shifts. Because those are the things that actually really make a difference in the end.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't want to go too crazy with it, but I just want us to, at the end of this conversation, reflect on ourselves and what can we do to be better for our dogs and our fellow dog people, regardless of what you do.
Yeah.
And let's shift from polarization to reflection. What can I do to be better? How can I do a very hard thing, which is control my emotional reaction? Just like dogs, some of us, I think, are emotionally reactive, and someone's are maybe not so much. And can I do better about reacting and reflecting, and then using the social media or using an opportunity, whether it be in person, which is where I really hope it happens, to go, ooh, let's talk about some things.
Yeah.
Or that's what I love going forward. And I will use this as a plug because I know Joe will really like that we will do this. But when we go to the conference, the Hold the Line conference later this year, or actually next year, this is the places to have some conversations.
Yeah.
Let's converse in person. And if you think that either one of us are full of crap and I'm an old dog trainer, he's the new young up and coming buck trainer that knows this stuff. But if you want to have a conversation and talk about ideas, let's do it there.
Yeah.
And I will make myself, and people kind of who know me really well know I have to be an extrovert for work. I'm truly an introvert. So if I am not in work mode, I am in my hotel room, not going out anywhere else.
Yeah.
So, but for the sake of changing someone's life and the sake of engaging and making things better in the dog world, I will happily come down and sit and talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not to prove anybody right or wrong. It's just I want to have a conversation and I want to be open with you and have discussions. Again, it comes down to pros and cons. There is no magic bullet. There is no secret sauce.
Yeah.
It's what will work for this team. And I want you to consider all the options available to you.
Yeah.
And then you at the end decide what works best.
Yep.
And again, fuck around and find out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how. Thank you again for.
Hey, it's always a pleasure. Cameron.
Yeah,
always.
and you had no idea where me and you had no idea where this conversation was going to go, and this is where we landed.
Yep.
So
and we're here.
Yes. So again, how do people find you if they want to bring you? Because again, I know you do seminars, and me and you actually will also say this. We're going to be doing some joint seminars together.
Yes.
We're focusing on young dog development. And we're focusing on transitional stuff. We're transitioning dogs from, let's say, a certain skill to another skill. So that could be from detection to patrol scenario, vice versa. So we'll be doing joint stuff, but how do people get a hold of you if they want to bring you out?
Yeah, so website is grassrootsk9.com. Instagram, it's K9_Mike. And I also have a Patreon, patreon.com/grassrootsk9. So you can reach out to me, reach out to Cameron also if you can't get a hold of me for some reason.
I got his number, so I can call him.
Yeah, and we could take it from there. Cameron, I just want to say thank you. It's always a pleasure when I get to sit down and we kind of chat dogs and whatever else comes up.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to doing some of these courses with you in the future again.
We'll be here at the Michael Ellis School to do some of this stuff.
It's my first time here. If you haven't been here, you should definitely come out here for a course. The facility is amazing. I'm super impressed. So
I was like, we've both been around. I can't think of another place that's like this.
Yeah, there isn't.
It's pretty cool. Michael's done an amazing thing here. Thank you again, my friend.
Absolutely.
And everybody, thank you for tuning in and listening to K9s Talking Sense, where it's okay to be nosy.